Are you ready?
I've come here today because I care about my country.
And I ask you to come with me.
To set sail towards America's destiny.
A better life for all who will work for it, and a better future for the next generation.
So today we call for a new patriotism.
For a president who will turn this country in a new direction.
I want to lead a process of renewal in America.
And I believe in opportunity.
An era of opportunity greater than anything any generation of Americans has ever known.
And I stand foursquare against racial discrimination.
Which is not merely a matter of policy, but a matter of morality.
Why am I running?
Let me tell you why I'm running.
Because I believe America is at a crossroads.
Will you help me now become the next president?
President.
President
President of the United States, officially.
1992, the presidential campaign of America's discontent. The people sense something's wrong with their government. They wonder, where were the watchdogs when the savings and loan industry plunged into scandal and crisis, costing taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars? They wonder about members of Congress who bounce checks. Wonder how these lawmakers can balance the federal budget when they can't balance their own checkbooks.
Yes, a time of deep discontent. Books hit the best-selling charts with titles like America, What Went Wrong? And Why Americans Hate Politics. More people are living in poverty. Unemployment is the highest in nearly a decade. The cities are troubled. One of the biggest, Los Angeles, is about to burst into flames.
Who's to blame? The Republican president and the Democratic Congress point fingers at each other.
And the voters? Most have turned sour and cynical and reluctant to go to the polls. Turnout for the presidential primaries is the lowest ever.
Before us, the road to the White House, a complicated journey that some say is too long, too tedious, too expensive, with too few solutions to America's problems. I'm Bernard Shaw.
And I'm Catherine Cryer. The path is about to take some extraordinary turns that will make this one of the most fascinating political races in American history. But in those first steps in the snowy winter of New England, it seemed like just another season of promises, promises.
New Hampshire, a landscape of wintry beauty. A battleground for those who would be president. In 1992, as in most other presidential elections, New Hampshire would be the first test for presidential wannabes. For the many disenchanted and disillusioned voters, that means New Hampshire also would be the first state to be lied to.
Well, those famous words, "We're from Washington, we're here to help you." That's what makes everybody laugh around here. Somebody says, "Oh, we're from Washington, we're here to help you." And bend over and get ready, here it comes.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
George Bush probably thought it should be easier. He had presided over some mighty achievements during his first term: the collapse of communism, the birth of democracy in the former Soviet bloc, a huge victory in a brief war against an overmatched opponent, achievements outside the borders of the United States. He could not or would not admit economic problems at home.
I am bullish on the economy.
I'm not prepared to say we are in recession when you have
I haven't really been able to sort out exactly why there has been this degree of pessimism.
I think I've known, look, this economy's been free fall.
Not surprisingly, the economy is an issue in New Hampshire, which has gone from having the country's lowest unemployment rate to the highest welfare and bankruptcy rate in the country.
People want a job. They want to work.
The economy today.
The economy.
The economy.
It's just too hard to make a living.
I think we should be providing them jobs. That's what the hell it's all about, period. Jobs.
It isn't going to move unless you challenge it frontally. And that's the whole basis of
Democrats early on bring up a touchy offshoot of the economic issue, health care.
I mean, you got 5 people here in midlife crises try to make their point about what health care should be. Now, look.
Who are these guys? For one thing, they're from a different generation than George Bush. Vietnam era versus World War II. Most of them influenced by the last Democratic winner who played on generational issues, John F. Kennedy. There's the glamour candidate, Nebraska Senator Bob Kerrey, divorced, father of 2, Vietnam veteran who lost part of his leg in combat and won the Medal of Honor. The war hero brings a touch of Hollywood to the campaign. While governor of Nebraska, he dated actress Deborah Winger, a frequent guest at the governor's mansion. With a solid middle-class Midwestern upbringing, Kerry tries to appeal to moderates and has a well-thought-out health care plan. There's the prairie populist, tough-talking Iowa Senator Tom Harkin. Born into rural poverty to a coal miner father and immigrant mother. He has a deaf brother and sometimes speaks in sign language on the Senate floor so his brother can understand him. He too served in Vietnam, but there's dispute over his war record. Turns out he flew damaged aircraft out of the country and was not the fighter pilot he once claimed to be. Harkin touts traditional liberal democratic values. He promises a New Deal, enormous public works programs, a rebuilding of the nation's infrastructure, financed by defense cuts he would make. There's the eccentric, former California Governor Jerry Brown, the unmarried son of a California governor. A varied background. He studied at a Jesuit seminary and once dated singer Linda Ronstadt. He believes big money the source of corruption in American politics and sets a $100 limit on campaign contributions. The fundraising vehicle, a much-bandied 800 number.
We live or die on the shoulders of people that will call 800-426-1112.
His first specific campaign proposal is released late in the primary campaign, a 13% across-the-board flat tax to replace the income tax. There's the quiet intellectual, former Massachusetts Senator Paul Tsongas. A Peace Corps volunteer and lawyer, Tsongas retired in 1984 after one Senate term when diagnosed with cancer. He claims he's completely cured, but the candidate frequently would have to prove his health. Issue-oriented, Tsongas runs on a platform outlined in a highly detailed book, A Call to Economic Arms. It's aggressively pro-business, advocating tax and investment breaks to revive the U.S. manufacturing base. He bluntly says there are no quick fixes to the economy. At the opening mark, there's already one casualty in New Hampshire. Virginia Governor Doug Wilder drops out in January, less than 4 months after he declared. He claims he's too busy running his state, but he's also running last in the New Hampshire polls and has raised the least amount of money. Now to the frontrunner, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. He's been running the longest, has the best organization and the most money. Not well-to-do and with a turbulent upbringing brought on by an abusive, alcoholic stepfather, supporters characterize Clinton's ascendancy as classic bootstrap. From Arkansas to Georgetown University, a Rhodes Scholar, Yale Law School. He was against the war in Vietnam and cut his political teeth working in George McGovern's 1972 presidential campaign. Now he's trying to move the Democrats to a more centrist position. Like his opponents, he's running on economic issues, highlighted by a tax cut for the middle class. Many prominent Democrats had shied away from a run at the presidency when George Bush looked unbeatable back in 1991. But now, buoyed by an earlier victory in Florida's influential straw poll, Clinton is running hard in New Hampshire with some innovative techniques, like a half-hour call-in television show.
Thank you, Governor. Peter Dudley from Durham, New Hampshire. You're on the air with the governor.
Hello, Governor.
Hi, Peter.
He also looks unbeatable until the hint of scandal threatens to shatter the dream.
You could say it started in the supermarket. That's where the sensationalist tabloid The Star sold. The newspaper reports that Bill Clinton has had extramarital affairs, 5 of them. The allegations are based on a 1990 suit filed by a fired Arkansas state employee, Larry Nichols.
Voters know that the Star and the National Enquirer and all those places are garbage. I mean, this is a guy that got fired for making illegal phone calls on state money and tried to bribe me to shut him up.
The next week, The Star drops the bomb. A report that Clinton has had a 12-year affair with lounge singer Gennifer Flowers.
Workers' comp is an unemployment card.
Even though this is supposed to be the straight, strictly issues campaign, the charge of adultery instantly dominates.
Is it something that's going to be dogging you through the campaign, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think if something like this comes up, it's plainly false and it's been demonstrably untrue, I'll be glad to say.
But the general subject material, as you know, is something that is
addressed
not
that
new.
too. I mean,
yes,
I just
sir.
think, but you know, usually for other people on other subjects, there's some reasonable standard of proof before you keep just reiterating that.
You're being
Governor, do you know about this man?
Does your wife know?
Oh, yes. Sure. She was an acquaintance, I would say a friendly acquaintance.
In a crucial moment in their political life, the Clintons, together, faced the voters on a special edition of 60 Minutes following the Super Bowl.
She's a legend and is described in some detail in a supermarket tabloid, which she calls a 12-year affair with you.
That allegation is false.
Are you prepared tonight to say that you've never had an extramarital affair?
I'm not prepared tonight to say that any married couple should ever discuss that with anyone but themselves.
Flowers counterpunches with a news conference.
Yes, I was Bill Clinton's lover for 12 years. And for the past 2 years, I have lied to the press about our relationship to protect him. The truth is, I loved him.
And plays tapes of telephone conversations with the governor.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Bill Clinton.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, I tried to call you. I can't believe I got you.
Well, when did you try to call me?
Last night, late.
Well, I was there.
I started calling as soon as I got home last night, and I called for a couple of hours.
The tapes offer no evidence of an affair, but they draw attention to long-running rumors of Clinton's alleged adultery. Now Flowers begins to lose credibility. The Star paid her for her kiss-and-tell story. Inconsistencies appear. For instance, her claim she was once Miss Teenage America. She wasn't.
Her unemployment rate is exploding.
Voters may be ready to get back to the issues that matter.
Times are hard. I need a job.
I've been laid off since September.
You're applying for a position in room service.
People are dying in the streets because of homelessness.
It's not easy. If you get sick out here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out here in the same situation.
But the Wall Street Journal reports allegations that Clinton dodged the draft during the Vietnam War. Clinton disputes the charges, saying everything he did was ethical, but he plunges in the polls. Tsongas gains. And now, a 1969 Clinton letter surfaces, anti-war and anti-draft.
It's the letter of a young man who loved his country and had strong beliefs about what was right and wrong at that time.
Again, the campaign took the offensive on national TV. This time on Nightline. And extraordinary for television, Ted Koppel reads the entire letter.
No government really rooted in limited parliamentary democracy should have the power to make its citizens fight and kill and die in a war they may oppose.
That's the way I felt. If I were writing that letter today about how I felt, I'd still disagree with our policy in Vietnam, but I wouldn't say the same things in the same way.
The charges of infidelity and draft dodging could have torpedoed Clinton, but the campaign does not cave in.
Bill Clinton from the great state of Arkansas.
Paul Tsongas does win New Hampshire with 1/3 of the vote. His economic message rings true in that state sagging under recession. Plus, he's a favorite son from the next door Massachusetts. Clinton comes in a respectable second with 25%.
Thank you. New Hampshire tonight has made Bill Clinton the comeback kid.
Though he saves his campaign, questions of Clinton's character will not go away. Nor would an old nickname. Slick Willie.
Don't put that on the wall in a taxpayer-supported museum.
As if George Bush does not have enough to worry about from the Democrats, he faces a wisecracking, hardball-playing challenge from within his own party.
Pat 92! Pat 92! Pat 92! How you doing? Good to see you. How you doing?
Patrick J. Buchanan, TV commentator.
Why is this desire to protect innocent, unborn human life, in your view, quote, a simple-minded moral absolute?
And newspaper columnist. Campaign motto, let the bloodbath begin.
We think Mr. Bush's hollow army is nervous, and we think we got a wake-up call for the White House tomorrow they'll never forget.
Though he's never held elected office, he served under Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Reagan.
Colt AR-15.
Some think Buchanan's so right-wing he's called a paleo-conservative.
Dynamic Asian capitalism is eating our lunch. I'm for the party of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. And that's not what's running the show down in Washington. The problem is the nature and character of the individuals who are marauding in our cities, who are not prosecuted and punished, and many of whom ought to be lying on slabs in an icebox.
He accuses President Bush of abandoning Ronald Reagan conservatism, of spending too much time on foreign policy.
Americans, let's start thinking of our own country, rebuild our own country, and get ready for the 21st century. And we can play as great a role there as we played in the 20th.
Of raising taxes.
Read my lips.
Send a message.
Read our lips.
Vote Pat Buchanan for president.
We can really shake them up, all right?
All right.
Buchanan's surprising strength plays well among the disenchanted another conservative had hoped to exploit. David Duke.
Race mixing will destroy the white race and the black race, that it destroys the uniqueness of our own peoples.
The former Ku Klux Klan leader, former neo-Nazi, founder of the National Association for the Advancement of White People, is running for president as a Republican. He's fared well among white voters in his native Louisiana, but he's blocked from being on the ballot in most states and never qualifies for federal matching funds. Meanwhile, Buchanan is doing well in the polls, so well he flushes George Bush out of the White House and into the fray in New Hampshire.
The 3-year record of George Bush, biggest spender in American history, highest taxer in American history.
Despite Buchanan's attacks, Mr. Bush opts for another target.
I'm getting sick and tired. I am every single night hearing one of these carping little liberal Democrats jumping all over my you know what. And I can't wait for this campaign.
The president invokes the Gulf War frequently.
If I'd have listened to the leader of the United States Senate, George Mitchell, Saddam Hussein would be in Saudi Arabia and you'd be paying $20 a gallon for gasoline. Now try that one on for size.
But his popularity plunges because of the recession.
New England lost 500,000 jobs in recent years. New Hampshire's lost 10% of her jobs.
From nearly 90% approval rating to below 50%. The voters of New Hampshire echo the dissatisfaction. 37% vote for Buchanan.
Did I not tell you we would make history?
An astonishing figure against a sitting president in his own party's primary. Exit polls show nearly 1/3 of all voters wanted somebody else altogether to run. They may get their wish.
If you're that serious, you, the people, are that serious, you register me in 50 states.
2 days after New Hampshire, a battered George Bush takes another blow. The specter of an independent candidate who would surely steal votes from him.
Candidates steam toward the next landmark on the political horizon, Super Tuesday, March 10th. Primaries in 11 states, mostly in the South, the biggest single-day delegate prize for Democrats, second biggest for Republicans. Pressure builds on Democratic New Hampshire also-rans Harkin, Carey, and Brown. They have to have some strength heading into Super Tuesday, generally viewed as Clinton territory because of his strong geographic ties to the South. The week before Super Tuesday becomes hotly contested. March 3rd, Junior Tuesday. Primaries and caucuses in 7 states, with Georgia the biggest prize. It gets ugly early.
You take your ass off. I started yesterday because you've been on my back for a long time. Put your hand up. Oh, put your hand up, Bill. No negative ads. Put your hand up.
Governor Brown.
Listen, put your
He
hand
hit Paul Tsongas on the gas tax, but he raised Arkansas's gas tax last year. Bill Clinton says he's for the middle class, but he's increased his state sales tax on food and clothing. The old politics won't change things. Paul Tsongas will.
Sure.
No one can argue with you, Paul. You're always perfect.
A cut in cost of living adjustments for older Americans and a 5-cent-a-year hike in the gas tax. But that's what went wrong in the 80s. Bill Clinton wants change. No more tax breaks for companies moving our jobs overseas, but new incentives to create jobs at home.
I tell the economic truth. I'm not Santa Claus. I'm not for all these tax breaks and giveaways.
Now, Paul, first I appreciate you're not Santa Claus, but you're beginning to sound like the Grinch that stole Christmas over there.
Then there's Pat Buchanan. He's creating political fireworks of his own out of his strong showing in New Hampshire. Seen as setting the conservative agenda for Bush, he forces the firing of the head of the National Endowment of the Arts, John Frohmeyer.
This so-called art has glorified homosexuality, exploited children, and perverted the image of Jesus Christ. Even after good people protested, Bush continued to fund this kind of art. Send Bush a message.
Some believe Buchanan is overplaying his hand by getting away from economic issues. But Buchanan gets 36% of the vote in Georgia, where voters see the heaviest saturation of negative advertising of the primary season.
I served with many of the Marines who fought in Desert Storm. The last thing we need in the White House is an isolationist like Pat Buchanan. If he doesn't think America should lead the world, how can we trust him to lead America?
All the backbiting may have backfired. Only 20% of eligible Georgians bothered to vote. Among those few, exit polls show nearly half wished someone else entirely was running.
No presidential candidate has worked harder than Bill Clinton.
On the Democratic side, Georgia Governor Zell Miller helps deliver Clinton's first primary win with a whopping 57%. Miller had helped write the handwriting on the wall for Carey and Harkin. Without the money to manage an extensive advertising blitz in 11 states, both withdraw before Super Tuesday.
After today, I will no longer be a candidate for presidency of the United States.
With regret, but with great pride for all that we have done together, that I am here this morning to end my candidacy for President of the United States of America.
On Super Tuesday, as he did in Georgia, Clinton puts together an impressive coalition of blacks, blue-collar, and moderate Democrats. Tsongas salvages only 3 regional wins: Delaware, Rhode Island, and home state Massachusetts. Clinton captures 8 primaries and caucuses, including big prizes Texas and Florida. The big political question now, how will Bill Clinton do outside the safe bet of Dixie?
Pressure mounts with every step on the road to the White House. The week after Super Tuesday, two big primaries, Michigan and Illinois. Big states, big population, big unions, big unemployment. Gadfly Pat Buchanan needs a lift. His support in many Super Tuesday states the week before had been at the 20% level. Now he hopes his America First campaign will play well among blue-collar workers in the Rust Belt. But the caravan slams into a contradiction.
He ain't wanted in here. Go on, get out of here. We don't want him to come. We don't want him to come out. Come on, don't you talk. Come on.
Buchanan's America First seems hypocritical when the candidate drives a German-made car.
But I'd like to hear why they think they're out of work. I've got my own ideas, but you can't learn from them if they ain't going to talk to you.
George Bush pounces on it.
Pat Buchanan chose to buy a foreign car, a Mercedes-Benz. Pat Buchanan called his American cars, quote, lemons. Pat Buchanan. It's America First in his political speeches, but a foreign-made car in his driveway.
The battered and beaten Buchanan brigade slows down its march.
I think we will stop the ads that deal with the Bush record of the last 3 years because the Republican Party is starting home to Mr. Bush, and it prefers him as the nominee. And I'm not going to do anything which I feel might permanently wound the president for the campaign in the fall.
My answer on the point is that from New Hampshire to the present day, I have been the one person who has consistently told all these people on these debates, I just assume they let everybody in, including you.
There's pressure, too, on Clinton. He cannot gloat over his smashing wins on Super Tuesday. After all, it was home turf for him. And Tsongas's only wins were in New England.
The other approach is to do the same thing George Bush did, which is to pander, say anything to get elected. Well, this is my opponent, Panda Bear.
So Illinois and Michigan become a showdown to see who can win votes outside areas of expected strength. Everyone goes after the union vote. Brown becomes increasingly bitter.
Does the question, Governor Brown, of Mr. Clinton's recent problems lead you to believe that he has an electability problem?
Yeah, I think he's got a big electability problem.
Well, what do you think it is?
I want to tell you what it is. It was right in the front of the Washington Post today. He is funneling money to his wife's law firm for state business. That's number one. Number two, his wife's law firm is representing clients before the state of Arkansas agencies, his appointees. And one of the key is the poultry industry, which his wife's law firm represents. And to read the local Chicago Tribune, there's 270 miles of Arkansas rivers that are polluted with fecal coliform bacteria and are unsafe for humans or fish. So it's not only corruption, it's an environmental disaster, and it's the kind of conflict of interest that is incompatible in the kind of public servant we expect from a president of the United States.
It doesn't sound like you could run as his vice president.
No, it doesn't.
They have a greater sense of civil rights and social justice.
Brown works hard for the African American vote.
And gender equality and statehood and fairness.
But blacks turn out for Clinton, as they did in the South. So do the unions. Two big wins for Clinton. And in the Democratic race, one surprise casualty.
I'm not Santa Claus. I'm going to treat you as great Americans.
Tsongas bows out. His I'm no Santa Claus economic plan did not play as well as it did in New Hampshire. Now he says he does not have enough money to wage an effective media campaign in upcoming New York.
It had been my intention to make only one announcement today, but because of a phone call that came in an hour ago, I have two to make. One is that I will suspend my candidacy for President of the United States, and because of the second phone call, I am pleased to announce that I've agreed to accept the presidency of the Speedo Bathing Suit Company.
Careful language that. By suspending, he keeps his delegates, keeps federal matching funds, keeps a window open for possible re-entry. A big moment for Clinton. He becomes the front runner again. Seemingly, nothing can stop him from the nomination, except for a surprise in New England. The week after the Michigan and Illinois primaries, a political shock in Connecticut.
We're for you because you're for us.
Give him hell, Jerry. Give him hell. Jerry, stay in it to the end, man. We need you.
Voter dissatisfaction equals a win for Jerry Brown.
It's devastating for Clinton and wonderful for us.
I'm still in shock.
Pure ecstasy.
We, the people, will take it back. This is your cause. This is our cause. And from seacoast to seacoast, this country is on the move. Political action works. Honest language can be communicated and can touch the hearts of lots of people.
A big April showdown looms in New York between the governor of Arkansas and
Governor Jerry Brown.
They may call me a moonbeam, but I fight the guns with the power. Hey, how are you?
Governor Moonbeam, the nickname bestowed upon Jerry Brown when he was California governor in the 70s. Seen as eccentric, he lived in a $250 a month apartment instead of the governor's mansion. Rode in his old Plymouth instead of the state limo. After an unsuccessful Senate race in 1982, Brown dropped out of sight, traveled the world, turned up in a Zen monastery in Japan, worked with Mother Teresa in India.
Every day, I'd help people, feed them, give them medicine, cut their hair, bathe them. Some of them were not able to take a bath. They were too far gone. And every day somebody would die. Hello.
Hello.
Now he's back with his anti-corruption message, fighting the big interests.
Whether it's the media, whether it's the big money, the insurance lobby, the medical lobby, I don't care what it is, unless you're willing to fight those people, nothing will change.
Brown for president. And what would you like to pledge? Your first name, sir? $100 is the maximum.
If you're a business, you can't contribute to the Brown campaign. You have to be an individual.
We're dependent on hundreds of thousands of people to call in, to give $10, to give $50. It's an amazing expression of democratic participation.
Fighting Bill Clinton in the roughest campaigning yet of the primary season.
Let me ask you, have to win here.
One step back, everyone. And he said, reported in the Village Voice, we ought to let the white kids teach the black kids to read, the black kids teach the white kids to fight.
Hey, wait, you're talking about playing in a club over an 11-year period.
That was
you
a
have an honorary
horrible
membership.
That was
and it's
a
club
horrible.
that excludes blacks.
You see, he's
and it excludes
don't scream,
Jews.
Jerry.
Maybe there's something about New York that just makes people want to yell.
A vote for the Democrats is a vote for the rape and abuse of women and girls.
Chill out. Chill out. By endorsing Jesse Jackson, who has embraced Farrakhan, who has embraced Yasser Arafat, you remove yourself from the Jewish community.
I want to apologize.
You do not have the right to treat any human being, including me, with no respect because of what you're worried about. I did not cause it. I'm trying to do something about it. I have treated you and all the people who've interrupted my rallies with a hell of a lot more respect than you've treated me.
This is a special broadcast of Sunday Edition.
The debate goes to TV. Brown does not make an issue of one Clinton revelation.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
Then, a key moment on The Donahue Show. Clinton is asked again about adultery.
Are you denying these allegations, or are you saying that it's not fair to ask them?
Given the sort of pathetic state of most of the United States at this point, Medicare, education, everything else, I can believe you spent half an hour of airtime attacking this man's character. I'm not even a Bill Clinton supporter, but I think this is ridiculous.
If you like the present tax code and the elite that maintains it, then you vote for Clinton. You vote for Bush. But if you want to take this stuff and throw it in the garbage can, you vote for me.
In the end, voters did not understand or did not accept Brown's flat tax proposal.
This is a two-part proposal. You lower the tax on people, you impose the 13% tax on business, and you take away most of their deductions. That's the way you make the economy efficient. Then, with an economic plan, you invest in the cities.
Paul Tsongas finishes second without actively campaigning. He thinks about re-entering the race, but doesn't.
My campaign must remain in suspension. With great love and respect for their efforts, I ask the draft Tsongas volunteers to cease.
We the people! We the people!
After all that work, Jerry Brown finishes third, behind Bill Clinton and behind a man who barely ran a race at all.
His name is Ross Perot, the billionaire businessman who would be president.
I'm 100% for you.
Be all that you can be.
Come in and sign. We need signatures. Come on in, you.
Everybody that comes in his store signs that petition, whether they buy anything or not.
And the American people are responding to his challenge to put him on the ballot in all 50 states.
Anybody else need some? Anybody still need some?
I can assure you that you have captured the attention of the two parties in terms of your desire that the people have a voice again.
Perot Petition Committee.
Perot sets up a toll-free phone bank in Dallas. It's one of the busiest 800 numbers in history.
We were getting up to 90,000 calls an hour. At one time, we got 18,000 calls in 1 minute.
1.5 million calls in a month.
There's just been this tremendous outpouring of people who want to have a government that comes from them. It has nothing to do with me.
We need a change, and I trust this man.
I personally feel right now that neither side has anything to offer.
I don't see any way of doing any worse in this country.
Anything to keep these other guys out of office.
Mr. Perot, I saw you on Phil Donahue.
I heard Ross Perot first on Good Morning America.
The undeclared candidate carries on his non-campaign through talk shows.
But Congress needs to understand what the people want as opposed to what the lobbyists want.
We are single politicians. Time for a real change is here.
The message: cut the deficit, create jobs, make the government responsible to the people.
American people are not robots. They are tired of a government in gridlock in Washington, and they are very tired of a government that sends them messages and tries to program them.
In the early 1980s, he's asked to lead the war against drugs in Texas. And to help rebuild that state's crumbling school system. The reviews are mixed on his success. His methods sometimes called heavy-handed. But now at his financial peak, voters are attracted to him.
Think he'll be a good president? I have no idea, but at least he's not a politician.
This attraction continues despite Perot's lack of specifics on issues.
Should the president go to the Save the Earth conference in Rio in June?
I don't know a thing in the world about it.
How much would you raise the top bracket, sir?
I don't know.
2 points, maybe?
No, excuse me. I don't know.
Flat tax, the Jerry Brown proposal, 13%.
I have not been able to study that in enough depth.
What do you think about federal funding of abortions?
Haven't spent 10 minutes thinking about it.
You'll have to take a position on that eventually, won't you?
I will, when I become a candidate.
You got OU on Saturday and the Austin thing on Monday. You got any other appearances scheduled?
Mr. Perot, can you tell us anything about your proposed campaign? Should those police officers be reprimanded at least?
Perot claims it's only the media wanting specifics. The people don't care.
There's something I know that you don't know. Out in grassroots America, they're not interested in those issues. They're interested in the principles. They're interested in the principles.
He's being taken so seriously, the White House goes on the attack. Harlan Fitzwater calls him dangerous and destructive. Perot's talk show blitz forces Bill Clinton into some unusual TV appearances. And though George Bush doesn't go on MTV, he calls a primetime news conference for only the second time in his tenure.
Will you commit yourself to debating Mr. Perot?
Is he an insider, an outsider?
The American people have been constantly looking for an alternative. You may have put Pat Buchanan behind, but now you've got Ross Perot.
There have been other independent candidates for president before, but never one who promised to spend up to $100 million of his own money on the race. George Bush and Bill Clinton ought to be worried. It's a little over a month before the conventions. Polls show if there were an election today, Perot would win.
A winter and spring of negative campaigning behind us, we are finally ready for the political conventions. That's when partisans can really get nasty. After all, up to now, they've only had members of their own party to insult. But first, Bill Clinton must make a decision that could influence the course of his road to the White House.
Are you in your final stages of the selection?
I'm getting very close, thank you.
Can you tell us about your meeting with Jerry Brown?
As the conventions approach, Clinton grabs the national spotlight again as speculators wonder who's going to be his running mate.
Governor, when are you going to decide vice president? I have no comment. No comment. No comment.
Clinton begins work on the process 2 weeks after his big win in the April New York primary. Heading the search team, former Deputy Attorney General Warren Christopher.
I want to make sure that my role is understood as simply being a ministerial role. He'll decide whether and who and when it'll be announced.
Within a month, the team proposes its short list. Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana, U.S. Senators Bob Graham of Florida, Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia, Harris Wofford of Pennsylvania, Clinton's former rival in the primaries, Nebraskan Bob Kerrey, and Senator Albert Gore of Tennessee.
Mr. Christopher, what took so long?
The suspense heightens with nighttime strategy sessions in the Arkansas governor's mansion. Private meetings with each of the 6 men. The final decision comes after yet another late-night gathering in Little Rock.
When he made up his mind last night about 11 o'clock, he was clear in his mind. He said, I'm going ahead now. I feel comfortable about going ahead. And he did.
Albert Gore is Clinton's choice. The word goes to Gore after midnight by telephone.
We're going to win this campaign!
The pick defies conventional wisdom. No geographical balance, both from the South. No age balance, both are young. Clinton 45, Gore 44. If elected, the ticket would be the youngest ever to serve. No ideological balance. Both have worked in the moderate wing of the party. Liberal, Republicans would later say. Gore is familiar with Washington.
Al Gore is the sort of public servant that I think we need more of in our nation's capital.
He is the son of Senator Al Gore Sr. And he's familiar with national campaigning. He had made a run for the presidency in 1988. Gore is strong on environmental issues. He's written a book on the subject, The Earth in the Balance, Ecology and the Human Spirit. And he voted for the war in the Gulf. Though he'd opposed the Vietnam War, he served as an Army combat journalist. That might balance Clinton's avoidance of the Vietnam draft. And if family values would become an issue, here's a carefully crafted photo opportunity to fall back on. The Arkansas governor's mansion on the day Gore is announced officially. These images of happy husbands, wives, and children beam across the country on TV the Thursday before the convention. A double dose of publicity. This ticket is a real challenge to George Bush's Southern power base. Last-minute preparations for the Democratic Convention, where Bill Clinton will accept his party's presidential nomination.
Let's go on the lower numbers, like 11, 12, 13 on F.
Mississippi, 46 votes.
More than 4,000 delegates converge on New York City. Day one, orchestrated Bush bashing.
Maine, the state where George Bush is about to have a retirement home, is present.
Right. My name is Ann Richards, and I'm pro-choice, and I vote.
Read our lips. No second term.
For too long, American leadership has waffled.
Friends in the Democratic Party, the American dream is not dead.
And wiggled.
It is not dead.
And wavered.
It is gasping for breath, but it is not dead.
George Bush is a timid man who hears only the voices of caution and the status quo.
Georgia Governor Zell Miller has another target as well.
Ross says he'll clean out the barn, but he's been knee-deep in it for years. If Ross Perot is an outsider, if he's an outsider, folks, I'm from Brooklyn.
Day two, the platform passes without much dissent. It echoes the themes sounded by Clinton during the primaries, allows credits for certain investments, cuts spending, raises taxes of the rich to reduce the deficit, offers a new GI Bill to make college affordable, calls for unspecified controls on health care costs, requires some welfare recipients to work, supports abortion rights. Pennsylvania Governor Robert Casey, an outspoken abortion opponent, is not allowed to speak.
The gag rule lives. So much for open debate and discussion. Litmus test, lockstep control has been imposed on this convention. And it's not right. And it's not democratic.
But there is talk on a politically sensitive subject, AIDS.
We're now going to welcome to the podium two remarkable Americans.
Tuesday night's session features very emotional speeches from two people infected with the virus that causes AIDS. Clinton advisor Bob Hatoy is first.
This is hard. I'm a gay man with AIDS, and if there's any honor in having this disease, it's because it's an honor of being part of the gay and lesbian community in America.
And Elizabeth Glazer, wife of actor Paul Michael Glazer.
America, wake up. We are all in a struggle between life and death.
And Jesse Jackson. Jackson gives a lukewarm endorsement. After all, he and Clinton had a row in June over provocative comments from rap singer Sister Souljah. She was quoted in the Washington Post as saying, "People kill black people every day. Why not have a week and kill white people?" Clinton responds in Jackson's backyard at a Rainbow Coalition convention and without warning.
And when people say that, if you took the words white and black and you reversed them, you might think David Duke was giving that speech.
The Post is about as familiar with the experiences of Africans in America, inner city urban youth, and hip-hop as Bill Clinton is.
Clinton's comments are seen as an attempt to distance himself from Jackson to win back Reagan Democrats. Plus, Clinton has shown he can win black votes without Jackson's help. So it's a Jackson diminished in stature who enters the hall Tuesday to push his vision of social justice.
We must build a movement for economic justice across this nation. This land is our land.
Anticipation builds toward the nominating speech. It's to be delivered by New York Governor Mario Cuomo. He, too, has had his problems with Clinton, angered by the Gennifer Flowers tape.
Well, I don't particularly care for Cuomo's demeanor.
Well, he is so aggressive.
Well, he seems like he could get real mean.
Mean some bitch.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have some mafioso major connections.
Well, he acts like one.
Yeah.
This is more than personal insult, personal hurt. You're really attacking the democracy in a fundamental way. When you say nigger, kike, mafioso, when you pit the groups against one another, you're dealing with the fundamental character of this place.
But Party Chair Ron Brown helps heal the rift, and Cuomo delivers a resounding nomination.
It's time for change. It's time for someone smart enough to know, strong enough to do, sure enough to lead, the comeback kid, a new voice for a new America. Because I love New York, because I love America, I nominate for the office of the President of the United States, the man from Hope, Arkansas, Governor Bill Clinton.
Now, the stage is set for the pivotal event of any convention, the speech of all speeches by the man they came to nominate. Clinton's been working all week on it, studying past addresses. But a political jolt out of Texas almost steals the show.
Ross Perot, as the frontrunner, comes under the gaze of the media's microscope.
How are you going to cut that deficit?
Not all of the stories are flattering. Some portray him as a corporate bully who hires a private eye to investigate his competition. Others report he pushed for an audit of the Vietnam Memorial after he was not able to change the design to his liking. But the biggest story yet, the Washington Post hints at a personal grudge between Perot and George Bush. The article ties Perot to a series of investigations. Investigations reportedly trying to link Bush to Oliver North's Iran-Contra arms scandal.
Yes, I do recall speaking to Admiral Poindexter.
To tie Bush into a supposed cover-up of American servicemen held in Vietnam, and to connect him to an alleged plan to delay the release of U.S. hostages in Iran until after the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan. Republicans jump on the report.
Ross Perot has a compulsion to investigate people. Imagine Ross Perot having the power of the IRS, the CIA, the FBI. Who would he investigate next?
But I feel a little tense about it when if the reports are true of investigating my children, my family. There's something, I don't think that's particularly American.
Perot launches a series of public appearances to dispute the charges.
There has been a 90-day effort to redefine my personality by a group called Opposition Research and Republican Party. They're generally known as the Dirty Tricks crowd.
Let me go to phone calls, and we understand that we have on the phone the chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Mr. Perot, it's not a dirty trick to track your words and evaluate your contradictions out there, which is what you deal with every day with the American people.
Is it a dirty trick to distort the truth?
Mr. Perot,
is it a dirty trick to lie?
No desire to distort the truth.
Well, wait a minute. You called in. If you don't have this, wait a minute. You called in. You wanted.
He begins to slip in the polls. And he ignores the advice of his consultants, who want him to start advertising and get specific on the issues.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
He chooses the NAACP convention as a chance to get the non-campaign back together.
I don't have any speech writers, and what you hear from me comes straight from my heart.
Again, ignoring his advisors, he writes his own speech, a pledge to fight for racial equality and economic reform.
Financially, at least, it's going to be a long, hot summer, right? Now, I don't have to tell you who gets hurt first when this sort of thing happens, do I? Your people do. Your people do.
You people. The phrase offends some.
I'm bothered by it, and I will talk to him about it as a matter of education. I've educated a lot of white folk on that.
Perot apologizes, but he keeps falling in the polls, from first to third.
Morning.
Then a fallout with one of his newly hired consultants. Ed Rollins, who masterminded Ronald Reagan's 1984 re-election, resigns, reportedly upset over the NAACP speech.
Obviously, with my 30 years of experience in politics, there are certain things that I've learned over that period of time that I thought was very important to do. And obviously, this is a different kind of a campaign, and I think the differences are just insurmountable at this point in time.
The next day, with his campaign in turmoil, 5 months after issuing his challenge on Larry King Live, Perot backs out.
I believe it would be disruptive for us to continue our program, since this would obviously put it in the House of Representatives and be disruptive to the country. In the states, so therefore I will not become a candidate. Now that the Democratic Party has revitalized itself, I have concluded that we cannot win in November.
Perot Petition Committee, may I help?
Perot Petition Committee. With all the talk of Perot's army forever changing American politics, his supporters are devastated.
I personally feel betrayed, and I know a lot of the volunteers do also.
Why am I disappointed in Ross Perot? I thought he had more guts than to drop out this early.
I think I can speak for all of us. We're just devastated. Very, very sad. Sad for America.
This man turns out to be a fraud.
All this happening on the last day of the Democratic Convention, a week in which Clinton had been gaining in the polls. With Perot's withdrawal, the speeches made tonight from Clinton and running mate Gore are eagerly anticipated.
We vow here tonight that in November, George Bush and Dan Quayle will be history. They have ignored the suffering of those who are victims of AIDS, of crime, of poverty. It is time for them to go. They have mortgaged our children's future to avoid the decisions they lack the courage to make. It is time for them to go. What time is it?
What is George Bush doing about our economic problems? Now, 4 years ago, he promised 15 million new jobs by this time, and he's over 14 million short. Al Gore and I can do better. Now, George Bush talks a good game, but he has no game plan to rebuild America from the cities to the suburbs to the countryside so that we can compete and win again in the global economy. I do. And George Bush won't guarantee a woman's right to choose. I will. Jobs, education, health care. These are not just commitments from my lips. They are the work of my life.
For the first time in decades, Happy Days Are Here Again is not played at the Democratic Convention. Emphasizing their youth movement and enjoying a spectacular bump in the polls, Clinton now has a big lead over Bush.
Everybody happy!
The ticket immediately hits the road, a 6-day, 8-state bus tour. On the run, and with Perot gone, the campaign must shift gears and craft a new strategy, how to win a two-man race instead of three.
Would you please be quiet and let me finish?
George Bush is in trouble. He now trails Clinton by more than 20 points in the polls. Clinton enjoys an unprecedented upswing after the well-orchestrated Democratic convention, an upswing that carries him from third place in June to frontrunner in July. Helping propel Clinton to this status, Ross Perot supporters flocked to him 3-2 over Bush, a surprise to virtually every political analyst in the land who believed they'd go to Bush. Plus, the equally orchestrated bus tour after the convention is a smashing success. Clinton and Gore, campaigning as a team, are on national television almost every day.
Isaac, I know you're glad to have your father back.
And their images blanket local TV. Republicans try to slow the momentum and seize the offensive.
And if there was ever a team of pretty boys, it's Bill Clinton and Al Gore.
The Democrats are up to their old tricks. They want to raise your taxes.
Clinton's quick response team issues replies, usually the same day, in time for the nightly news and the next morning's newspaper.
He proposes the largest tax increase in American history, larger than what Mike Dukakis and Walter Mondale proposed together.
Well, we tried it their way. 10 years ago, we had the highest wages in the world, and now we're 13th.
And for good measure, Clinton offers up his own attacks.
The notion that the Republicans won the Cold War alone reminds me of the rooster who took credit for the dawn.
The president had vowed to avoid sleaze, but some in his good cop, bad cop campaign go the other way. An attack news release headlined "Sniveling Hypocritical Democrats." It refers to Clinton as Slick Willie, makes fun of his weight gain, alludes to accusations of marital infidelity against him, asking which campaign had to spend thousands of taxpayer dollars on private investigations to fend off bimbo eruptions. Claims Clinton is running a campaign that's lower than a snake's belly. Bush renounces the attack. The campaign issues what it called an apology from the memo's author, who later denies she had apologized. Another GOP target, Clinton's wife Hillary. A contrast to the grandmotherly Barbara Bush, she is an aggressive lawyer with a career of her own. Republicans say that makes her fair game.
She's likened marriage and the family to slavery. She's referred to the family as a dependency relationship that deprives people of their rights.
They don't have a record they can run on. They don't have a vision for the future. So now they're trying to attack my wife. I feel sorry for them. I mean, it's just pitiful.
Bush's approval ratings sink to new lows. And now, allegations of a long-simmering rumor that Bush once had an affair with his former secretary, Jennifer Fitzgerald. Known as the other Jennifer, she now works in the State Department. A new book quotes a now-deceased diplomat saying he had arranged for a 1984 tryst between the two in Switzerland.
There is an extensive series of reports in today's New York Post alleging that a former U.S. ambassador, a man now deceased, had told several persons that he arranged for a sexual tryst involving you and one of your female staffers in Geneva in 1984.
I'm not going to take any sleazy questions like that from CNN. I am very disappointed that you would ask such a question of me, and I will not respond to it.
I cannot figure out, other than to say there are some in the media that are desperate to help Bill Clinton and to hurt President Bush.
Some conservatives in the media, though, have been calling on Mr. Bush to drop out. Columnist George Will in July, followed by the influential Southern California newspaper, the Orange County Register. The campaign is in disarray. Mr. Bush calls in the cavalry, his old friend, James Baker. Baker resigns as Secretary of State to take over as White House Chief of Staff and to run the campaign. It's a repeat of 1988, when Bush was trailing Michael Dukakis and Baker stepped in to take charge. But it's worse this time. With the Republican convention in a few days, the president desperately needs his own convention bounce. And he wants to make the speech of his political life.
Just a heartbeat away from George Bush lies another problem: his vice president. Witness this line of demarcation in Dan Quayle's political life.
Add a little bit to the end there. Spell that again, Mark.
BP and AP. Before potato, after potato.
Think of potato. How is it? You're right phonetically, but what else? There you go. All right.
The Vice President of the United States misspells the word potato, a mistake that could have happened to anybody, but it seems to happen so often to Dan Quayle.
You guys need a donut up there?
Like when he said people could breathe on Mars.
We have seen pictures where there are canals, we believe, and water. If there's water, that means there's oxygen. If oxygen, that means that we can breathe.
And liftoff of Endeavour on America's 50th space shuttle flight.
And he's the head of the National Space Council, entrusted with coordinating U.S. space policy.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck to all of you. I hear Marilyn standing here. She'd like to say a word, too.
We made it!
How about the time he paraphrased the United Negro College Fund motto, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste."
What a waste it is to lose one's mind, or not to have a mind is being very wasteful.
Or the way he describes his job.
One word sums up probably the responsibility of any vice president, and that one word is to be prepared.
There are so many incidents. A publication called the Quayle Quarterly documents the gaffes.
We've never run out of material. It just keeps pouring in, and Dan Quayle never lets us down. So he's very active and influential, in fact, behind the scenes, in spite of the fact that when he gets up, he can barely keep his foot out of his mouth.
The jokes notwithstanding, Quayle is a politician.
Well, Victor, you may not be running for anything, but I am.
Some people say a cagey one. He's building a power base among conservatives as chairman of the President's Council on Competitiveness. The mandate: to ease the federal regulatory burden on business. The council changes all kinds of government rules, from environmental regulations to pension plan guidelines. Its behind-the-scenes work is so controversial, Congress has been investigating.
This agency, which none of us had ever heard of before, is now taking on the role of a super government, operating in secret, not responsible to anyone.
One for instance, critics charge the council is sabotaging the Clean Air Act by illegally easing emission standards. The critics claim this illegal change would save business millions of dollars and would make those interests owe Quayle a political debt.
On competitiveness, headed by our Vice President, who I think is doing a superb job. You talk about unfair criticism. The way this man holds up to it, he's doing just fine, thank you.
The fight against an over-regulated economy, and in particular regulators that are just going too far, the fight has just begun.
In the campaign, he draws fire as point man for the Republican issue of traditional family values.
I am never going to back down from talking about traditional values in this country.
In May, he blames the Los Angeles riots on what he calls a poverty of values. He follows up with his concept of an undefined cultural elite, media elite, and Hollywood elite.
They seem to think the family is an arbitrary arrangement of people who decide to live under the same roof, that fathers are dispensable, and that parents need not be married or even of opposite sexes. They are wrong.
The claim that some lifestyles are more moral than others ignites a nationwide debate on single motherhood, sexual preference, and gay rights. At the same time, Quayle continues to attack Bill Clinton's draft record. That, despite lingering questions from the 1988 campaign on Quayle's service in the Indiana National Guard during Vietnam.
I also served in kitchen patrol and peeled a lot of potatoes and things that other specialists do.
And new reports that his family used its influence to get him in the Guard. By late summer, just before the Republican convention, there are calls to dump Quayle.
Dan Quayle is not taken seriously by the American people. He is not respected. People don't think he's ready to be president.
A CNN Time poll shows nearly half of those surveyed say Dan Quayle ought to be replaced. His unfavorable ratings are at 60%, higher than Bush, Clinton, or Gore. Quayle says there is a scenario in which he would volunteer to drop out.
Oh, if I was convinced that I was hurting the president, of course, but I'm helping the president. I'm working hard for this president. I'm articulating a message. I'm out there on the campaign trail a day in and day out. I'll be out there tomorrow, so I think I'm able to help the president.
The Chicago Tribune puts it bluntly in an editorial. But there are compelling political reasons not to take the newspaper's advice.
He's keeping the conservatives at bay, so to speak. I mean, the conservatives feel very badly if something happened to Dan Quayle.
The boss himself puts an end to the dump Quayle talk.
Mr. President, is the Vice President's chair a little uncertain these days?
No, it's very certain, and I'm not going to take any questions here because we got an awful lot of work to do.
So they head to the Republican convention together, for better or for worse.
Very well. Stand by. Thank you.
The GOP throws a convention in Houston, and not everybody comes. More than 1/3 of Republican members of Congress stay away. Some had elections to worry about at home, but many moderates shy from the politics. Some disagree with the stridently conservative anti-abortion platform.
How can we as a party reconcile our goal to take government out of the daily life of business, but yet thrust government into the most personal and private of individual decisions?
Dan Quayle accentuates the controversy. When asked what he would do if his daughter became pregnant, he seems to soften suddenly.
Well, it is a hypothetical situation. I hope that I never do have to deal with it, but obviously I would counsel her and talk to her and support her on whatever decision she made.
And if the decision was abortion, you'd support her as a parent?
I'd support my daughter.
President Bush also says he'd stand by his granddaughter should she want an abortion. And just before the convention, Barbara Bush says abortion and homosexuality are personal choices and should not be on the platform. But they are. The platform calls for a constitutional amendment banning virtually all abortions, opposes same-sex marriages and gay rights laws, accuses the Democratic Party of waging a guerrilla war against American values. On day one, these values are embraced in primetime television by the party's right wing. Pat Buchanan delivers a speech one Republican U.S. Senator calls nasty.
Elect me, and you get 2 for the price of 1, Mr. Clinton says, of his lawyer spouse. And what? And what does Hillary believe? Well, Hillary believes that 12-year-olds should have the right to sue their parents. And Hillary has compared marriage and the family as institutions to slavery and life on an Indian reservation. Well, speak for yourself, Hillary.
That's tempered somewhat by the warmth of this man, Ronald Reagan.
This fellow they've nominated claims he's the new Thomas Jefferson. Well, let me tell you something. I knew Thomas Jefferson. He was a friend of mine. And Governor, you're no Thomas Jefferson.
The convention strategy: emphasize the accomplishments of George Bush and blame all the country's ills on the Democratic-controlled Congress. Day 2, a leading contender for the '96 Republican nomination, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Jack Kemp.
If we're to change America, we must change the United States Congress.
Day 3, Family Values Night, with differing views of family. TV evangelist Pat Robertson, who ran for president against Bush in 1988.
When Bill Clinton talks about family values, I don't believe he's talking about either families or values. He's talking about a radical plan to destroy the traditional family and transfer many of its functions to the federal government.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present Marilyn Quayle.
Marilyn Quayle raises questions of character.
Not everyone joined the counterculture. Not everyone demonstrated, dropped out, took drugs, joined in the sexual revolution, or dodged the draft.
Labor Secretary Lynn Martin, who nominated Bush.
In the past decade, the years of George Bush and Ronald Reagan, it is our America that's moved the world. We ended the 45-year-old Cold War with the Soviet Union by our deeds and our defense strategy. We won Desert Storm and reaffirmed the prestige of the United States as the most powerful force on this earth for good.
Largely unknown a decade ago, AIDS is the third leading killer of young adult Americans today. But it won't be third for long.
The emotional high point of the evening, matching a similar one at the Democratic convention. Mary Fisher, daughter of Republican moneyman Max Fisher. She is rich, white, powerful, and she is HIV positive.
We have killed each other with our ignorance, our prejudice, and our silence. We may take refuge in our stereotypes, but we cannot hide there long, because HIV asks only one thing of those it attacks. Are you human?
And a surprise appearance with a perfect family values photo opportunity.
Thank you, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Tomorrow night comes. Dan Quayle apologizes to no one.
Like so many Americans for me, family comes first. When family values are undermined, our country suffers. Americans try to raise their children to understand right and wrong, only to be told that every so-called lifestyle alternative is morally equivalent. That is wrong. For more than a month, the media have been telling us that Bill Clinton and Al Gore are moderates.
if they're moderates, then I'm a world champion speller. Thank you all.
And George Bush puts an exclamation point to the attacks on Clinton and the Democratic Congress.
Just pause for a moment to reflect on what we've done. If I had stood before you 4 years ago and described this as the world we would help to build, you would have said, George Bush, you must have been smoking something and you must have inhaled. 2 years ago, I made a bad call on the Democrats' tax increase. I underestimated Congress's addiction to taxes, and with my back against the wall, I agreed to a hard bargain, one tax increase, one time, in return for the toughest spending limits ever. Well, it was a mistake to go along with the Democratic tax increase. And I admit it, but here's the question for the American people. Who do you trust in this election? The candidate who's raised taxes one time and regrets it, or the other candidate who raised taxes and fees 128 times and enjoyed it every time? My opponent says America is a nation in decline. Of our economy, he says we are somewhere on the list beneath Germany, heading south towards Sri Lanka. And then he said that America was, and I quote again, I want to be fair and factual, I quote, being ridiculed everywhere. Well, don't let anyone tell you that America is second-rate, especially somebody running for president. Thank you so much.
They've been running forever, it seems, but now it's down to just two. And just one major issue, the economy. And there is a difference.
We know that the clumsy hand of government is no match for the uplifting hand of the marketplace.
George Bush, cut spending, cut taxes, get government out of the way so the private sector can create jobs, create a tax base. So-called trickle-down economics, the heart of the Republican platform for more than a dozen years.
So help me God.
We need real incentives to invest in this country, to educate our people, to control health care costs, and to compete around the world.
Bill Clinton. The government prods the economy to create jobs by investing in education, infrastructure, job retraining. Tax the rich to pay for some of it. Independent analysis suggests neither candidate can add. The Wall Street Journal reports Bush's economic plan has a $440 billion shortfall over 5 years. Clinton's $359 billion. Nonetheless, the candidates take the message to the people every day.
Grand Canyon divides me and my opponent on the issues. Two candidates, two very different philosophies.
The president says that there are great differences between him and me, and boy, is he right about that.
I hold a firm belief that a government is too big and it spends too much of your money. And my opponent disagrees. Governor Clinton has already called, and get this now, it's in his plan, for $200 billion in new spending.
The president fails to mention that Clinton also calls for $140 billion in spending cuts.
We must go beyond the failed policies of the last 4 years and the last 12 years. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? For more than 10 years, most Americans, literally 2/3 of our people, have worked harder for less money.
Only partly true. People are working harder, but census figures show after taxes and accounting for inflation, median household income is up. A CNN analysis shows each side misrepresents the other with regularity, and each resorts to sticking the other with some old labels.
After 800 days without an economic plan as President of the United States, he offered one, which was nothing more than a warmed-over version of trickle-down economics.
But Governor Clinton seems to believe that every day is April 15th. And his tired old tax and spend philosophy is wrong for this country.
Bush is losing on the issue of the economy, so he resorts to raising questions of trust and character. Read that, Vietnam draft. Bush reminds the American Legion Convention who put on a uniform and who didn't.
50 years ago this summer, America's at war. At the age of 18, I went off to fight. Like many of you, I was scared, but I was willing. And I was young, but I was ready.
2 hours later, Clinton makes an extraordinary appeal before the same group.
If any of you here choose to vote against me because of what happened 23 years ago, that is your right as an American citizen, and I respect it. But I hope that you will cast your vote looking toward the future.
Though voters don't seem to care about Clinton not serving in Vietnam, the question doesn't go away. The Los Angeles Times reports Clinton's uncle tried to delay his nephew's induction. Clinton says the media is not playing fair, that his Vietnam draft conduct is far less significant than Bush's conduct during the Iran-Contra affair. Clinton mentions a memo which contradicts Bush's claim that he was never present when 2 cabinet members objected to the arms sale to Iran.
Which, if true, would call into question not only the president's veracity, but his support for illegal conduct, which you all don't even ask him about. It's amazing. You ask him, and he says,
and during a news conference in Washington,
there was no follow-up, no nothing.
Polls show voters have more questions about Bush's Iran-Contra explanation than Clinton's explanation of his draft status.
President George Bush on the EIB network.
But the president ups the ante anyway on the ultra-conservative Rush Limbaugh radio show. Previously, he had let underlings do the dirty work in the trenches. Now he does everything but call Clinton a liar.
He has not told the full truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Let's let him level with the American people, that's all I'm saying.
How you going? We just want to be sure we're helping.
Desperate for votes, Bush uses the power of incumbency to become suddenly a big spender. Up to $20 billion to rebuild Florida after Hurricane Andrew. But he doesn't say how he'd finance it. He promises South Dakota farmers a $1 billion subsidy for wheat exports. $755 million of flood, drought, and freeze relief to farmers in Texas.
I'm a Baptist, so I believe in deathbed conversions, but this is amazing.
It also may work. Local polls show in each of these states, Bush enjoys an upswing. Clinton is staking out some traditional Democratic turf, like the Jewish vote.
It is in our nation's best interest to continue military and economic assistance to Israel because this vital aid encourages long-term stability in the region and demonstrates United States' commitment to Israel's security and sovereignty.
While Bush shores up his support among evangelical Christians who helped elect Ronald Reagan.
I was struck by the fact that the other party took words to put together their platform, but left out 3 simple letters, G-O-D.
God bless the USA.
With Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition, which sent 15% of the delegates to the Republican convention.
You and I have been accused of focusing our energies on what has been called a narrow, irrelevant topic, the American family. Well, I believe it is our critics who are guilty of tunnel vision.
The coalition has raised $13 million to help campaign for Bush. By blaming everything on the opposition party, Bush is still trying to make up for his read my lips promise.
I found out the hard way. I went along with one Democratic tax increase, and I'm not going to do it again, ever, ever.
But the president's spokesman backtracks and says the statement is not a pledge. Perhaps a notice that some taxes are in the offing, no matter who is president. Right now, nothing is working for Bush. Despite selling billions of dollars of jet fighters to Taiwan and Saudi Arabia, saving, he claims, thousands of American jobs. Despite railing against the Endangered Species Act, saving jobs again the theme.
I have come here to tell you that I will not stand for a solution that puts at least 32,000 people out of work. It will not stand. I mean it. Each pair of owls gets 3,500 acres to itself. And meanwhile, jobs and families and communities are being wiped out in the process.
Despite doing everything but calling Clinton a socialist.
And my opponent and his advisors can trace their intellectual roots to the social engineering ideas popular at the turn of the century.
Trailing by more than 10 points, Bush picks up the tempo.
Come on, you guys!
6 airport rallies in a day in states surrounding Arkansas. A siege of his opponent's home state.
America, America.
In Arkansas, individual income has slipped. 48 states have basic civil rights laws that ban discrimination and guarantee equal opportunity. But not Arkansas. You know, on issue after issue, he talks a great game, but his actions betray his words. If you go swimming in that Arkansas River, keep your mouth closed and hold your nose. They are doing a terrible job on pollution. As incredible as it may seem, most inmates in Arkansas serve less than one-fifth of their sentences behind bars. This is not fair to the good people of Arkansas.
Then a whistle-stop tour of the heartland, Michigan and Ohio. States he must win.
So to get the full $150 billion, Bill Clinton would have to tax individuals at $36,600 a year. And I do not think these people are spending their time on the Riviera. They are the hard-working men and women and families in the United States. We must not let him raise their taxes.
It's more of the same attack, counterattack the candidates have engaged in for months.
We are not in decline. We're on the move.
Clinton may be sitting on his lead, but he is leading. George Bush needs something to shake up the race.
I've been listening to the people since February.
Here it comes, once again, out of Texas.
Ross Perot issues an extraordinary summons to the Bush and Clinton campaigns.
I think it's a historic day, certainly in this campaign, because we will only talk about the issues.
High-level staffers make an unprecedented pilgrimage to Dallas, looking for an endorsement. They don't get it.
The volunteers in all 50 states have asked me to run as a candidate for President of the United States. Jim Stockdale, our vice presidential candidate, and I are honored to accept their request. They have asked me to run this campaign on the issues and to assure that the problems that the American people are concerned with will be dealt with after this election is over.
2.5 months after he dropped out, he's back. But was he ever really out? During his hiatus, he continued producing ads and paying staff and avoiding the scrutiny of what he believes is an unfair media.
Is it unfair for me to wonder why you don't write a balanced presentation? Let's assume you find, well, here's the good, the bad, the beautiful, the different. Are you trying to present a balanced picture of a candidate? Leave me out of it. Or are you just trying to play gotcha journalism? I rest my case.
At this point, Perot is out of pocket $17 million already, with only 7% support in the polls to show for it. And his unfavorable rating is 66%, the highest of any candidate. Though the spotlight is on Perot, Bush and Clinton continue their campaigns conventional style.
Now, I can't compete with some of these other entertainment shows, but please, stay with me on this program tonight, because we're going to go down in the trenches and talk about your jobs and talk about why our country is in decline.
But here come the Perot big guns to launch his economic message. A multi-million-dollar barrage of infomercials that would continue until Election Day. They center on Perot's favorite, some say only, issue, the deficit. But no amount of paid-for commercial time can hurt or help Perot as much as what happens next. With the okay of Bush and Clinton, Perot is invited to debate them on equal footing, another first in this campaign. Never before have three presidential candidates squared off in a face-to-face-to-face debate.
Mr. Perot, he will have 2 minutes to answer, to be followed by rebuttals.
Just being on the stage gives Perot legitimacy. He scores points with his feisty retort concerning his lack of government experience.
Well, they've got a point. I don't have any experience in running up a $4 trillion debt.
There's only one sharp encounter. It's over a trip Clinton took to Moscow as a student during the Vietnam era.
I said something the other day where I was accused of being like Joe McCarthy. I just find it impossible to understand how an American can demonstrate against his own country in a foreign land, organizing demonstrations against it, when young men are held prisoner in Hanoi or kids out of the ghetto were drafted. And I'm sorry, but demonstrating, it's not a question of patriotism, it's a question of character and judgment.
You have questioned my patriotism, but when Joe McCarthy went around this country attacking people's patriotism, he was wrong. Your father was right to stand up to Joe McCarthy. You were wrong to attack my patriotism. I was opposed to the war, but I love my country, and we need a president who...
Compared to their skirmishes, Perot's homespun style seems different.
We've got to clean this mess up, leave this country in good shape, and pass on the American dream to them. We've got to collect the taxes to do it. If there's a fairer way, I'm all ears.
Good evening and welcome to the second of 3 presidential debates between the major candidates for President of the United States. Now, tonight's
the second debate is historic. The audience asks the questions.
We're making history now, and it's pretty exciting.
The ground rules are set early.
I'm spending my money, not PAC money, not foreign money, my money, to take this message to the people.
The first negative campaign run in this election was by Governor Clinton. And I'm not going to sit there and be a punching bag.
The Washington Post ran a long editorial today saying they couldn't believe Mr. Bush was making character an issue, and they said he was the greatest, quote, political chameleon for changing his positions of all time. Now, I don't want to get into that. Wait a minute. Let's...
Can we focus on the issues and not the personalities and the mud?
Mandated by the audience, they do talk about issues such as health care.
And my program is this: keep the government as far out of it as possible, make insurance available to the poorest of the poor through vouchers, next range in the income bracket through tax credits, and get on about the business of pooling insurance.
My plan in the next 12 years would save $2.2 trillion in public and private money to reinvest in this economy, and the average family would save $1,200 a year under the plan that I offered.
saying tonight we've got bad health care, but very expensive health care. Folks, here's why. Go home and look in the mirror. You own this country, but you have no voice in it the way it's organized now.
The final debate, George Bush's last chance, still trailing by nearly 20 points. The pressure's on, and he's aggressive, but so are Clinton and Perot.
Admit it that Arkansas is doing very, very badly against any standard. Environment, support for police officers, whatever it is.
Governor, is that true? Mr. Bush's Bureau of Labor Statistics says that Arkansas ranks first in the country in the growth of new jobs this year. First.
If you were sitting at home now and just heard this exchange about Arkansas, who would you believe?
I grew up 5 blocks from Arkansas. Let's put it in perspective. I think probably we're making a mistake night after night after night to cast the nation's future on a unit that small.
Why is that a mistake?
It's irrelevant.
What hit?
You know, now, yes,
what he did as governor of Arkansas is irrelevant?
No, but you can't, I could say, you know, that I ran a small grocery store on the corner, therefore I extrapolate that into the fact that I could run Walmart. That's not true.
Mr. Perot.
Governor?
I carefully picked an Arkansas company, you notice there, Governor.
All right. Governor?
Mr. Perot, with all respect, I think it is highly relevant.
Clinton is especially critical of Bush's new promise to put James Baker in charge of economic policy.
The person responsible for domestic economic policy in my administration will be Bill Clinton. I'm going to make those decisions, and I won't raise taxes on the middle class to pay for my program.
President Bush, you have 1 minute.
That's what worries me, that he's going to be responsible. And he's going to do, and he would do for the United States what he's done to Arkansas.
Perot scores a hit on George Bush's strength, foreign policy.
If you create Saddam Hussein over a 10-year period using billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money, step up to the plate and say, it was a mistake. If you create Noriega using taxpayer money, step up to the plate and say it was a mistake.
Judging by the polls, Perot is the big winner of the debates. His supporters are ecstatic.
The president sent 350 people to prepare and had 100 phone lines. Governor Clinton sent 200 people to prepare and had 100 phone lines. We sent 3 people to prepare. Had 1 cellular phone and 2 folks didn't have much to do.
This post-debate rally, a typical Perot appearance, surrounded by family and followers. He's yet to meet the public. He's still hostile to the news media.
I wish you could have been with me backstage with all those news people whining about the fact that I hit them a couple of times tonight.
Mr. Vice President, there was a vice presidential debate, too. The unfamiliar person on stage, James Stockdale, Perot's running mate. He's a Vietnam War hero turned scholar, admittedly not a politician.
Who am I? Why am I here? I'm not a politician. Everybody knows that. So don't expect me to use the language of the Washington Insider.
Why is Bill Clinton qualified to be president of the United States? You've talked about Jim Baker. You've talked about trickle-down economics. You've talked about the worst economy in 50 years. You haven't told us one reason why Bill Clinton is qualified to be president of the United States.
I'll be happy to.
I want to go back and make a point.
Well, you've asked me a question. If you don't answer my question, I will answer yours.
I've made a statement. I have not asked a question. I've made a statement that you have not told us why Bill Clinton is qualified to be president of the United States. I hope America is listening very closely to this debate tonight.
And I think America is seeing right now the reason this nation is in gridlock.
Gridlock might describe George Bush's campaign at this point. Clinton and Gore are trying to guard against overconfidence. What could cause them to fumble? Would you believe another surprise from Ross Perot?
I wish these draft dodgers would shut up so I could finish my speech. It's pathetic.
Here's how bad it is for George Bush. Out of 435 Republican candidates for the House of Representatives, only 26 have asked to be photographed with him. In New York, incumbent Senator Alphonse D'Amato is talking about how similar his views are to Clinton's, and he's a Republican.
Clinton, D'Amato, Clinton.
Bush is forced into a whistle-stop tour of the South, which in the past had been solid Bush territory.
Don't listen to these pundits telling you how to think, and don't listen to these nutty pollsters.
You cannot flip-flop on the issues every single time. One day you said you've told the full truth on your sorry draft record, and the next day it comes out you haven't.
Accusing Clinton of waffling.
The crowd that's in there has run out of time, run out of energy, run out of ideas, and it's time we ran them out of town on November 3rd.
Clinton is so far ahead, he appears to be looking for a landslide.
We want a mandate to rebuild this country and put our people first again. We want to make a real difference in our people's lives.
A confident Clinton heads to Republican country, Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana, states which have not voted for a Democratic president since 1964. Ross Perot, meanwhile, does something unusual. He's actually campaigning.
Thank you very much. Here's the picture on our country's debt. Look at how it's grown over the years.
In the first 2 weeks of October, he spends $26 million, more than double Bush's and Clinton's spending combined.
I would be honored if you would accept the loan of my Purple Heart to keep with you throughout the campaign.
How many of you have seen the Purple Heart ad?
He unveils a new slogan,
I'm Ross, and you're the boss.
some new rhetoric,
Which one of the three candidates as young men would you want your daughter to marry?
and he reveals a shocking new allegation that propels the race into turmoil.
Later, I got a report that there was a plan to smear my daughter Carolyn, who was about to get married on August the 23rd, and believe it or not, disrupt the church service at her wedding.
He says he dropped out in July because Republican dirty tricksters were going to distribute a lewd, doctored photograph of his daughter.
Let's get a few things straight. Number one, the FBI did not investigate the smear on my daughter.
He admits he can't prove it and shows anger when reporters press him on it.
I am sick and tired of you all questioning my integrity without a basis for it. I am sick and tired of you ignoring the people who can confirm the articles when you print or run your stories.
If you're going to make these charges, then you should provide some evidence, something.
And I think the news media needs to take a look at this, because they're the only ones left who can investigate it and prevent us from electing a paranoid person who has delusions.
Perot has claimed the Republicans have been playing dirty tricks the entire campaign. There are questions, too, about State Department searches of the passport files of Clinton and his mother. Clinton supporters believe the searches were politically motivated, a Republican attempt to dig up dirt concerning Clinton's anti-Vietnam War stance and his trip to Moscow in 1969. Perot's allegations shake up the campaign. Bush seems to have new energy, and he's buoyed by some rare good economic news. The economy grew a surprising 2.7% the third quarter. Bush steps up the attacks on his now favorite themes.
When that Oval Office phone rings, or at night the phone at the White House rings, my question to the American people is, who do you trust?
The very idea that the word trust could ever come out of Bush's mouth after what he has done to this country and the way he has trampled the truth is a travesty for the American political system.
My dog Millie knows more about foreign affairs than these two bozos.
All I can say is, Bozo makes people laugh and Bush makes people cry, and America's going to be laughing on Tuesday.
Governor Clinton and ozone, they just keep talking about change, change, change. That's all you will have left in your pocket if Governor Clinton becomes president of the United States. That's it. You know why I call him Ozone Man? This guy is so far off in the environmental extreme, we'll be up to our neck in owls and out of work for every American. This guy's crazy.
His attacks on my record, his allegations about my tax proposals, and the other negative ads he's running are simply not true. I mean, a lot of this stuff he's just making up. He said that he would do whatever it takes to win, and he's proved that he would.
They feel it slipping away from him.
Bush's tactics are working.
They know we're going to win the election.
With some of Perot's support eroding, polls show a virtual dead heat. Just as Bush is gaining, a bomb drops. A newly disclosed document appears to contradict Bush's comments about his role in the Iran-Contra arms for hostages scandal. A 1986 note, written by former Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger, says Bush was in favor of the deal to sell missiles to Iran and send profits to Nicaraguan rebels. Bush has claimed he was not aware of the deal until much later.
Today's disclosure that President Bush knew and approved of the arms for hostages deal with Iran not only directly contradicts the president's claims, it diminishes the credibility of the presidency.
Polls consistently suggest that a majority of the American people don't believe you, regardless of your best efforts.
Well, too bad, because I've told the full truth, and if I hadn't, you can bet your neck that this highly partisan Congress would have tried to make something of it.
Give us
Then another worry for Bush, a scandal involving possible illegal use by Iraq of U.S. loan guarantees and an alleged cover-up at high levels of his administration. The Atlanta branch of an Italian bank, mostly owned by the Italian government, made billions of dollars in loans to Iraq until 1989. These loans may have been used to buy arms. The Justice Department is prosecuting the branch manager for fraud. But he claims the U.S. and Italian governments knew the money was being diverted. The chairman of the House Banking Committee, Henry Gonzalez, charges Bush's current and former attorneys general, William Barr and Richard Thornburg, have obstructed his investigation into the scandal and ought to resign.
Great rally. Thank you.
So, everybody's regrouping for the final sprint. Perot with a series of rallies to regain credibility. He must assure the electorate that a vote for him is not wasted. He makes more expensive time buys on network TV and sharpens his attacks on his opponents.
The governor talks about all these dramatic improvements in employment and jobs and what have you that he's created in Arkansas. If we decide to take this level of business creating capability nationwide, we'll all be plucking chickens for a living.
Every vote is up for grabs. We've got to fight, and we need your help, and we need to win here.
Bush and Clinton rushed through states where the recession has hit hard: Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. Bush continues trying to change the subject from the economy.
Give me your support based on trust, based on character, based on confidence in the United States of America. When Jimmy Carter left office just before, we had inflation at 15%. We had interest rates at 21%. 21%. We had the misery index at 20, and America was then in decline till Ronald Reagan and I came along and straightened it out and gave hope for this country.
Clinton now says he's going to fight like an underdog. He's lost his voice.
This election is a race between hope and fear, between the courage to change and the comfort of the status quo, between those who say things are fine and those of us who believe that we can do better, that America deserves better, and that starting on Tuesday with your help, it will be a new day for the country. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Clinton's voice reflects the grueling pace of this race. Here's where Bush and Clinton have been just since Labor Day.
President of the United States, George Bush. Next President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Go to the polls. Tomorrow is a big day.
24 hours to go.
Here we go for the last day.
Bush and Clinton top off the back-breaking campaign with airport rallies to make their final pleas.
I ask for your support for 4 more years to help every young person in this room enjoy the American dream.
Why should I let myself worry?
Perot dances in Dallas.
One day, what in the world should I do?
Clinton campaigns while the others sleep. A brutal 30-hour, 4,000-mile marathon stretching from Pennsylvania to New Mexico, finishing up Tuesday morning, Election Day.
Governor Clinton and his wife Hillary are descending from the Clinton-Gore plane right here at Stapleton Airport.
I need you. Be there, and tonight we will celebrate a new future for the greatest country in the history of the human race. Thank you, and God bless you all.
After all the
I
planes,
am to be a candidate for president.
trains,
There's a clear choice when it comes to getting
buses,
Our first bus trip in St. Louis.
TV talk shows,
We get to talk to the American people.
and town
There
meetings.
isn't any easy formula.
After reaching out publicly to millions of Americans with rhetoric, dreams, and attacks, it's now up to individual Americans in the privacy of the voting booth. Election Day, last stop on the long and tortuous road to the White House.
Precinct number 114 or 115 only.
That's K-U? Yes, K-U-T-C-H-E-R.
Voters have been coming out in, it seems to me, record numbers. I live in the Arlington.
And you put this in if you want. You can put it in, sir, if you want.
Fold your ballot in half, I'll place it in the box.
Where are those hot lights?
George Bush is casting a ballot this morning, then waiting out this day in his adopted home.
This is the start, right? Good to see you. Good to see you.
I have the right to come and vote, and even if I lose, I win.
I voted for Ross Perot because he's the best man.
I voted for Bush. I think he's done a pretty good job.
I voted for Bill Clinton because it's the first time I think a Democrat could win.
I voted for George Bush.
Bill Clinton.
Ross Perot. Bush.
Clinton.
Perot. You shall see.
Governor Clinton has cracked the Republican lock on the South. He has won Georgia tonight.
Since Republicans have been running for president in 1856, the state has gone only Democratic once. It does it again now for Bill Clinton, Vermont.
Bill Clinton has won New Jersey.
What do you say? Who's the runner, USA? Hey, hey, what do you say? Who's the runner, USA?
If I were using it as a bellwether, and I would use it as a bellwether, I think it's going to be a tough race for the president as it moves across the country tonight.
Tonight is a great night.
Tonight is Bill Clinton's night.
It looks like it could be a big night for the Democrats.
Colorado, Governor Clinton has won those 8 electoral votes.
State of Maryland.
Massachusetts.
Michigan goes for Bill Clinton.
Clinton has opened a commanding electoral lead over President George Bush.
We're shaping up to have a very, very big landslide tonight.
The 7th election in a row, Idaho goes
for George Bush.
And Washington in 1988 went for Dukakis. It stays with the Democrats.
254 for Governor Bill Clinton. He's getting closer and closer every second.
George Bush is clearly on the ropes. He's going to have to carry every single state that is either undecided or too close to call, just about, to win this election.
Nationally, Mr. Perot has done pretty well for himself. Mr. Perot at 17%, atop of Perot, George Bush at 40, and Bill Clinton at 44.
There's no miracle coming tonight, folks. There's no miracle tonight.
Governor Clinton is now President-elect Bill Clinton. He has won this presidential race along with his running mate, Senator Al Gore.
And in the end, it was the state of Ohio voting for Bill Clinton that managed to put him over the top.
I wonder what they're doing down at Ross Perot's headquarters in Dallas.
I want to thank all of you who are here tonight and all the people who have come together across the nation. Starting last February, you did something that everybody said couldn't be done. Millions of you came together to take your country back.
I want the country to know that our entire administration will work closely with his team to ensure the smooth transition of power.
On this day, with high hopes and brave hearts, in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning.
More than 100 million voters turned out, an all-time record, to propel Clinton to his big victory. The voters heeded his clarion call for change and changed Congress, too.
105 new seats in the House, the second highest turnover in United States history. The most blacks ever in the House, the most women ever in the House and Senate. The country's first black female senator. Gains for Hispanics, Asian Americans, and Native Americans.
Can the new president, working with the new Congress, change the country? We'll let you know in 1996 when we begin a new road to the White House. For CNN Special Reports, I'm Catherine Cryer.
I'm Bernard Shaw.